So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I joined the Lee Summit Chamber of Commerce 1 year ago. So I am still getting my bearings in the great city of Lee Summit. A lot of wonderful things going on. We are a chamber of about 1,015 members. We run the gamut from the solopreneur all the way up to the major medical institution, so in everything in between. We're a very robust chamber. We are very active in many different regards for your traditional chamber things. We are getting more engaged in other arenas than what we've had before. My predecessor, Nancy, was in the business for 16 years, kind of one of those matriarchs of the chamber and who we always called for general advice. So I stepped into her heels and took over July 5th of last year. In addition to that, of just doing our traditional normal chamber stuff, we also manage two functions for the city of Lee Summit. We manage the tourism efforts under a contract with the city of Lee Summit, and we also manage the community branding process for the city of Lee Summit. Many cities brand themselves, give themselves a logo, a tagline, something that they can champion, but many communities don't go the next step by keeping it in front of their citizenry, their tourists, and the individuals that are thinking about doing business and those who are thinking about expanding their business. So we manage that for the city of Lee Summit. All told, that's about around $180,000 a year for us from those contracts from the city of Lee Summit. Why is that important and why am I bringing that up here? Because again, today's topic for you in the next 45 minutes, or I took away some of your time, so probably 42 minutes. Economic development in today's chamber. You heard Mick talk about chambers of the future, so really I could also modify the title of economic development in today and tomorrow's chamber. And so again, I fell into this business. I had no idea Chamber of Commerce was a profession. I hail from higher education. I actually have my bachelor's in finance and my master's in counseling. And would you have ever told me in a million years I would use both my degrees almost every week? And I do. The counseling more like every day. But I was trained, my formal training is actually to work in student affairs for a university. And so I did that for a few years. Then one Saturday evening picked up the newspaper and there was a job posting for a Main Street director for Cape Girardeau. It tugged at me. I threw my hat in the ring. I was that for a year and a half. And this place called the Chamber called and said, we're looking to get more engaged in community development and redevelopment. We have been watching you for a little bit. We'd like to see if you'd like to join us on our team and lead it not just for downtown, but lead it for our general area. So I was the vice president for community development at the Cape Girardeau Chamber for 10 years. Again, looking for that next step. Lee Summit was my next stop. And so at the Cape Chamber is probably a lot of my examples, because again, I'm still on the run and getting my feet wet still in Lee Summit. But we've set some things in motion there too, and I'll speak a little bit about that. Let's start off with the definition of economic development. That is probably the most nebulous term out there. Our president talks about job creation. Our governor talks about job creation. Our mayors talk about job creation. Our county commissioners talk about job creation. But do they actually create jobs? That's where the class participation is. Do they create jobs? No. Yes, technically they do if they hire more government employees. But that's great from the federal government standpoint, or even from your city if they hire additional personnel. But they, on a whole, do not create jobs. They create the environment that is conducive to allow jobs to be created or retained. This is a standard definition that the International Economic Development Council, IEDC, uses in all of their curriculum and through their international certification for certified economic developers. A program, and I'm not going to read all my slides, you have it in front of you, but this one's important. A program, a group of policies, or a set of activities, keep that in mind, that seeks to improve the economic well-being and quality of life for a community by creating and or retaining jobs that facilitate growth and a stable tax base. That is a common definition I just want to kind of give you as a baseline for what we're going to be talking about in the future of our presentation. And then again, I hope you're hearing a little bit of chamber in each of these words, okay? Because that's important. Here are some economic development efforts. Actually, IEDC really boils it down to really kind of 4: job creation, job retention, workforce development, and what was the quality of life. That's really the 4 that they center on. But more and more, economic development is also centered around business climate, infrastructure. Wow, that's a huge national conversation. That's a huge state conversation. Infrastructure, tourism, entrepreneurship, workforce development. All of these kind of fit under the umbrella of economic development. Now, I'm not going to dwell on entrepreneurship or some of the small business strategies. I think Kelly spent some time with you guys. That's one module of kind of like the economic development tree. And so in each of these areas, there are things that you could tick off in your respective organization you touch at some point in time. There's no doubt in your given day, you probably touch 2 or 3, maybe some days 6 of these various topics. We get to work in very dynamic and complex organizations. First and foremost, we're the advocate for our members. We're there for our members all the time. So with that, let's talk about just a little bit of the dynamics. I know I have a volunteer board member that's kind of serving in an interim capacity. Who's this? Who's that? Who's the volunteer executive director? God love you. Hats off to you for doing that. So, because that's awesome, and thank you for being here. But just so I can get a sense, because again, I have your roster here. Who would kind of identify themselves from an urban chamber? Okay. Kind of more suburban chamber? Okay. Let's go kind of rural. Okay. Okay. Now, some of your chambers actually hit all of them because you're getting multi-mass regions, because I see St. Louis Regional is in here. I see some of your chambers actually run the gamut, from a wide array of things and areas that you work on. So again, that helps me just get a sense of where everybody's from, just so I can tailor my comments to you, hopefully bring you into that. But more and more in economic development, these bullet points get a little bit expanded, and let's talk about this workforce development piece a little bit. This is where you kind of roll in your talent attraction efforts, talent retention efforts, and then also the quality of life. The catch-all is usually the quality of life, and sometimes you're starting to hear more and more sense of place. And this is where some of the other things come into play, some of your controversial items, diversity, ADA issues. Well, you heard Mick say the social order, things get out of whack a little bit. And the state of Missouri has seen a fair share of those in the last couple of years. Unfortunately, we're experiencing one right now with a travel advisory, which is very complex and why that is there. But how do we, as a state and the individuals in this room, go back to your respective organizations and put the mirror in front of your face and say, okay, what else could we be doing to make it more of a better environment so Missouri is seen in a better light on the national stage and international stage too, because it is having an effect. That advisory is having effect, and that's unfortunate when you have clients and prospects looking at your state and kicking the tires and say, do I want to go to the show me state? And things like that pop up. They really start asking hard questions. Imagine getting that phone call. Hey, we're not thinking about coming to your state because. Okay, players in economic development. This list could be 1,000,000 miles long. 1,000,000 miles long. But let's just start out with the major players in economic development. Local, county, state, and federal governments, special authorities. What are special authorities? Let's talk about ports. Let's talk about if you have special taxing districts within your community, like a community improvement district or a transportation district, or there's something established by the state to look at a particular strategy or initiative. Don't ever forget those special authorities, because they also have abilities to do things that normal governments cannot do. Sometimes they're given permission to do so, and the resources with it, because usually most special authorities have a taxing line that comes to it in some way, shape, or form. Public-private partnerships, you're seeing a lot of that more. There we are. Chambers of Commerce and business associations, right there on there. Universities, community colleges, and career and technology centers. And would that not be an interesting conversation today? Universities are continually to garner more and more attention and try to get more students into their 4 years, but the 2 years have always and continually been strong. And then the career and technology centers with the customizable programs that they provide for the businesses that need a well-trained workforce. But this particular bullet point, let's just talk, and again, I'm going to keep referring to Missouri because that's where we're at, but this particular point, this is a hard one. With state budget cuts continually for higher ed, there are many years there that the universities and 2 years were asked by the governor to not raise tuition. Please don't raise tuition. We'll do our best we can to not cut your budgets. And the budget situation still did not get better. And so they're facing cuts. So I don't know about you, but I have a lot of higher education institutions in my community that felt the hurt. And they're still feeling the hurt. Anybody else have a university or a 2 year and they're feeling the hurt? Which is hard because, again, when you're talking back to that stable tax base, when you have those universities and institutions having a payroll of faculty, staff, technicians, you name it, they could be large economic engines for your community. And when they have to shave off 20% of their faculty, those are very good paying jobs gone that may never come back. So workforce development organizations, if you may not know, your area is assigned to a workforce development organization, or a WIB, a Workforce Investment Board. The state is divided up into areas. If you're not familiar who your WIB director is, seek that person out. Just to get to know them, and we're going to talk about that later. But workforce investment boards are very critical, especially as we begin to talk more and more about workforce development strategies. When many of your companies that are your members can't find enough people to work for them, or if they have people who work for them, they may not be skilled enough to work for them. And so they need help getting them skilled up. Utility partners, don't ever forget about your utility partners. They're very vital in economic development roles. Philanthropic organizations, we in CAPE, we consistently and always communicated with our United Way, our Ministerial Alliance, you fill in the blank. Because they also, while you have the tab and pulse on the business community, many of nonprofits are your members as well. Don't ever forget about them, because they will also tell you the pulse of what they're hearing. Like, for instance, in Lee Summit, one of the food banks was in critical dire need of food for their food pantry. Well, that should signal to somebody what's going on in our community and why are so many families in desperation for food. Okay, so again, that's that social networking, that you will, but use your philanthropic organizations for that. If you're in major metropolitan urban areas, you also may have the blessing of private foundations. The challenge there is to find out what their purpose is and why do they exist and what will they fund. And so that's a really keen and different way of doing that. And then also neighborhood groups. There's groups that form to actually take on a grassroots effort to change their community for the better. And they could go down to the neighborhood. And those are typically called community development corporations. So CDCs is short for that. It's really those individuals who say enough's enough. All the organizations in our community are doing the right things. They're doing what they should, but we need special attention in this area. And so we're going to band together, and sometimes that may be a couple bankers and a couple neighborhood leaders, a couple business leaders, but they form together a community development corporation to say enough's enough, we're going to make this place better. And so they drive it down to whether that be the census tract or the neighborhood, but they can do that. They have the ability to form under that. Okay, well, let's shift focus to the role of an economic developer. In my time in Cape, I had the blessing of, when I joined the team, my CEO at the time, John Maynard, had said, if we're going to bring you in this role of community development, redevelopment, we'd also like to see if you can get some additional training and be an economic developer. Because at the time, we did not manage the economic development affairs for the area. We were a separate entity, but we were heavy development. Our members had always looked to the Cape Chamber for development advice, development counsel. We had always been engaged in that conversation. But in this particular arena, in community development and redevelopment, there was a major gap. And so he sent me along the way to get some training and to be a certified economic developer. And that's not an easy process, but it was an amazing amount of coursework that exposed me to a whole different arena of what we could be doing from the toolbox of, whether that be grants, whether that be loans, whether that be how to package a project together, and all doing it behind the scenes with our members. So the role of the economic developer is to provide leadership and policy making that, again, back to that business climate, a conducive business environment which enables for future business growth and expansion. And not only do you advocate for it, but then once you put it in place, you can't run away. You actually got to administer it, make sure it's running and the operation it could. Here are some bullet points at the end, or some words at the end, that I think is also very, very applicable to the chamber world. And again, that's why you see a lot of chambers who do economic development. The roles they play: an analyst, an advocate, a catalyst, an educator, gap filler, and a visionary. And in many chamber teams, several different staff members may have different abilities. Like, you may have someone on your staff, and I did in Cape, who was a visionary, but he wasn't a detail guy. He was like, I need a detail guy. And so found a detail guy. Okay, I need someone else to complement me in this behavior. This is what I need to go out and build and assemble that team. And for some of my communities that are sitting in the audience right now saying, Tim, I am a one-person shop. There's no way we can add another person. What, are you crazy? Stay tuned. I'm going to help you there, okay? But that being said, sorry about that, guys. It's my phone. You also fill these roles too. People ask you for your advice and what you see down the road. You are an advocate through and through for your members. You analyze, you assess the situation, try to make the best and quickest decision you possibly can. So you fit in that void too. Okay, you got to know your data. Economic development is driven by data. If you don't root yourself in data and give yourself some context, you could really get off the rails fast. Because the businesses and organizations you're going to work with, if they're thinking about expansion, I guarantee you they already know your data. And if you don't, you're going to look like a fool. It's just flat out honest. So in economic development, really, this is just a short smattering. This is not a comprehensive list. But for just a general introduction to economic development, it's a good start. Never forget about your business license offices. Back to your data. Be a great question to ask them: how many licensed businesses are in my community? How many licensed businesses are in my county? And can you give that to me for the past 5 years? There's an easy trend. Are you on the upward? Are you on the stable? Or are you on the decline? That is a business climate. And that lends itself to analyzing your economic area. Know where your economic area is. If you represent a county, you're a county. If you're representing a major urban area, you may be 40 counties. I love you, because that's hard. But if you are also a city, you just be a city too. Define it for yourself. Know what your current activity is. Again, back to MissouriEconomy.org, and start reading those reports that you can get your hands on, because you're going to start figuring out trends. And know what qualitatively, you as a chamber executive can probably tell me what are your community's attributes, what are the strengths, and where do you stink at? Where do you fall short? Qualitatively, you could probably create that short list. But can you validate that? Can you validate that through the reports? Again, you're probably saying to yourself in your head, some of you, I don't have time for this. And then my answer to you is you have to have time to start playing in this world. Because as you heard Mick say, it's about relevancy. If your economic developer is in a different community, based out of the county, not within your sphere of influence right now, we're going to talk about that a little bit later too. If your organization has economic development in its auspices, go play nice with them. Go figure out how you can help. Certainly there's a way you can engage. Again, chambers are vital to economic development. Economic development is a relationship business. Oh, that sounds very similar to what we do. We're in the relationship business. I can't tell you how many times an opportunity arose from just a private conversation with the business owner. When the Cape Chamber actually brought on, via contract, the economic development services, we actually started a business retention program. And we are actually identified via industry who are kind of, one, our members within that industry, and who are the other key players. Because again, we were asked to deploy economic development strategies, so we had to go meet with non-members too. That was our charge, that was our role. And through the first 75 meetings, we were able to identify 6 opportunities where the business owner said, or the manager or the HR person said, we are on the cusp of taking it to the next level. We would have not known that had we did not go out and plop our butt in their office and say, how are you doing? What are your obstacles to growth? How can we help you? And you will be amazed how much they will share with you in those conversations. Those are very impactful. Now, I will say this, and we'll talk about this later. If you have an economic development organization doing those visits, go make yourself available to the economic development official to maybe be on the team. Or if you see or hear something, economic developer, that you may not have time for, we're here. We're here to help you. And we will only help you until you let us know what we can help you with, okay? Again, we always know how to connect people very quickly to the right resource and a trusted resource. We're always pretty much aware of upcoming investments for our members. If we're in tune and engaging our members on a regular basis, we form that relationship that eventually they say at a cocktail reception, hey, I'm getting ready to do this. I just want you to know that if I experience anything and I need help, I may ring your bell. And if they're not saying that, you also should be providing that, saying, if you get into a bump in the road, your first call is me. There's no one else better than me that I can be your advocate to get you over that bump in the road. We've always been approached as a chamber. How many times in a given month is your organization approached about the latest and greatest idea? Or we want you to work on this festival or this opportunity for the artists. We have to say no so many times, but in many occasions, sometimes our communities, our counties, and even our states say, we have a massive problem. We really don't know how to fix it, but we need you at the table, or we need a board member of yours at the table. We're constantly approached. So let's capitalize on that by saying we're ready to do something. And again, we are key economic development partners, whether you know it or not. You are in the game. Let's own it, let's be it, and let's say we are a massive partner to you in economic development strategies. Chambers who don't do economic development, here's some really quick tips. It's in your notes, you don't need to write it down. I've already mentioned the first one. Start building a relationship with your economic development official. Find out who that is, whether that be in City Hall, at the county, your regional planning commission. Sometimes they fill that role for smaller communities because they do it in more of a wider sense. Offer business trainings for your members, or take advantage of this organization, Missouri Chamber. Sometimes they will also bring people to you. So there may not be as much work for you, but you can promote it to your members to come out and see Kelly on a particular business training that you can bring to your community. Educate your membership about current economic conditions. You may be surprised on how many of your business owners don't read the news. They get most of their news from Facebook. And is Facebook always right? No. Survey your membership. Again, with that relationship with the economic developer, there may be a business climate survey that you might be able to send out there. It'd be great to capture that data back. Again, knowledge is power. The more power or information you have from your members, the more you can advocate for them. Visit your members by industry. I've already mentioned that one. But don't forget, as a circle back, when you have enough information, whether qualitatively or quantitatively, summarize that and get it to your board. Tell them what you're doing. Give a little paragraph. This is what I heard from the bankers. This is what I heard from real estate. This is what I heard from the hotels. There's some trends in there. And also don't be afraid to share that with your elected officials if you're comfortable doing so, because that's also powerful. They reside in their communities. Host a CEO roundtable. Attempting to build that currently where I'm at. There's a current organization that we just recently began facilitating, the economic development organization. We're taking turns, so I'm doing that. Left one in Cape Girardeau, called it Grow Strong. If you want to talk to Kim about that or the other Cape Chamber people, Grow Strong is a CEO of 30 or more employees, of chief executives or chief decision makers. And when I left, it was like 82.
Where's about the same?
Okay. 82. Again, for the CEO, it's once a quarter. But for as a chamber, we held it monthly. So the CEO could choose to come to January, February, or March, so it was the same topic. And so we were able to get in front of 60 to 70 pretty well attended CEOs, and we were able to have closed door conversations and to say what's really going on. Or we can peel back the curtain a little bit and say, here's what we as a chamber are seeing. Or vice versa, what's Cape Girardeau up to? Can we talk to the mayor? Yes, absolutely. We'll talk to the mayor. We'll bring him next time. Great. Because then it's that dialogue that can happen and hopefully work over some things that are currently going on. Never forget your existing business space. 80 to 85% of job creation comes from your current businesses. Never forget that. The new and shiny are always great, but it's your existing businesses that are going to rock and roll. And stay tuned in this regard. I think the state is going to be working on some additional business retention efforts for existing businesses. This is exciting. You have one of your own now as the Department of Economic Development acting director. He comes from chamber, so he gets this stuff. And he also did business retention visits. If you have an economic development strategy for your area, read it and see if anything appeals to you. And on the flip side, if the really not very sexy topic is not getting any attention and nobody's doing anything with it, follow on the sword, take it, do it. Show people you can actually produce, especially if you'll take the topic that nobody wants to deal with. Show people that you can engage in hard conversations. But if the economic developer looks at you and says, you know what, there's this one area we really need to get working on and I have nobody to work on, that's an area of opportunity for your chamber. But you got to know where that economic development strategy is, and that's where you're going to get after that relationship building with the economic development official to say, okay, what do you guys got going on? What's the strategy? And if they say we don't have a plan, wow, there's another first point you can start on. You need a plan. We need to get our act together. Utilize your network. Chambers who do, and I know I'm hitting on time, chambers who do economic development, here's some suggestions for you. Making sure that plan, again, if there's not a plan, that's item number one, do one. Get it, make sure it's current and relevant to your current economy, but looking forward 10 to 15 years. Don't forget to tell your members that you engage in economic development. You'd be amazed how many organizations, just because they just assume everybody knows that they're doing it, tell people you're doing it, tell your members you're doing it. So when they get that dues renewal, they're like, heck yeah, I'm gonna renew in the St. Louis Regional. They're doing awesome stuff. Yeah, they may be bringing a competitor in, but they're growing this economy. Yes, I'm gonna absolutely renew. Share the results. Let your members and communities know what is going on, especially if you are engaging on retention visits, or if you've gotten feedback from prospects who have looked at the area. Why did they choose to go elsewhere? And sometimes that's more revealing if you can get it. If you can get that data, that's great. Especially for like North County, that'd be great to find out why they're not coming. That might be an indicator of things to work on. Look beyond your city and counties. Who else can be a partner? Back to what you were saying. We came together as 3 counties. I will tell you, I currently serve as the president-elect of the Missouri Economic Development Council for the state. And in the northern part of the state, much like CCM, the MAPS had districts, MEDC has districts. 2 years ago, Northwest and Northeast Missouri were meeting as separate districts. They're now starting to meet as one big, massive district, because they were having similar problems. They were losing a couple companies that would eviscerate a community, like 200 jobs. That's hard to lose that. So they're now sharing notes together as economic developers. What can we do to work together? And they're working on strategies with that. Tricks of the trade, I'll go through this real quick. Your integrity is everything. Mean what you say what you mean. If you're going to say you're going to do it, please do it. If you don't, you're going to lose trust like that. Confidentiality is vital. I shouldn't have to say it, but I am. You know a lot of things. And if you have a propensity to let some things leak out of your mouth while you're at reception with a third beer in your hand, please contain yourself. Especially if you're in a smaller community, because I will get back to you real fast. Even in a metro too, you'd be amazed how fast the network is. Especially with our lovely social media tactics. So, economic development is a marathon, not a sprint. Patience is a must. You're going to get kicked in the gut so many times. There's so many cases where a project will fall apart at least 3 or 4 times before it finally comes together. It is so infuriating. But patience is a must. Communicate, communicate, communicate. If you engage in an economic development strategy and it's pretty meaty and you are engaged in the conversation, take the role as kind of facilitator, not secretary of the meeting. Please don't ever be in that role. But if you have critical stakeholders in the room and you're talking about really meaty stuff, do the follow back. Just say, hey, great meeting today. Here are the 5 points that I took away from the meeting. Does everybody agree with these 5 points? Oh, and by the way, here's the things that I volunteered for. Hey, Chuck, you volunteered for this. Tom, you volunteered for this. And Susie, you're on this task. Did I get it right? Because then now you have, whenever you get back to the next meeting, if Susie didn't do it, Tom didn't do it, but you did, you're now seen in that business owner or manager or prospect's eyes as the go-to player. It's all about power, information, and strategy. Constantly educate yourself. I know you have no time, but continue to look at the major headlines of your newspapers, national newspapers. Read economic reports as they come out from the Department of Economic Development. The more you school yourself up and be educated about statewide and more local information, the better. And develop simple ways to connect with your prospects. I stink at names. But if you're meeting a prospective client or a business owner looking to do something, you better make sure after you end that meeting you know their name. Or you write a personal note card to say, that was great to have a meeting with you today. I'm so amped up about your opportunity. We're on board. Here's my cell phone. I'm available anytime. The things that you can differentiate yourself. I know it sounds corny and hokey, but I'm telling you, it's those things that really make a difference. And especially if something happens in their lives and you know it. Son graduated from high school. Their sister's getting ready to go into a business venture. Ask about the sister at the next meeting, not about where they're at on their project. Back to the team approach. Lessons learned. You have to start engaging as a team. If you hate your economic development, you need to figure out a way to have a kumbaya moment and have a cocktail and get on a better page. Please make that every effort. If you don't know your economic developer, that's a great opportunity for a lunch. Once that lunch has occurred, say, this is a great conversation. I think we need to do this on a monthly basis. Everybody can spare lunch. It takes freaking forever for elected officials to understand and grasp what the heck you're working on. Patience, back to the patience. Don't burn bridges, disagree appropriately. There is nothing wrong with being strong in your convictions. But if you leave a room and if you have burnt a bridge, especially if you're in the room with a business owner or a CEO or whatever, that person can make a moment's judgment, and next thing you know, you've lost a potential project or even a business. Prep your prospects. Never promise anything you can't deliver. That's back to the integrity topic. And find the human side of things. Have fun. If you find out your business owner or aspiring entrepreneur likes something, like a certain scotch or a round of golf, find a way to do it. There's golf tournaments everywhere. And you can pick up a bottle of scotch pretty easy. Just to make that differentiating factor. But then also just have fun. There's nothing wrong with having a general chit chat with your business owners, your managers, or your prospective clients. They'll remember the fun moments more so than the brutally mundane talk about the building that they're getting ready to buy. Okay?